The Final Fantasy series is a video game series that has been around for over 35 years, with the first game in the series released by Squaresoft for the Famicom in 1987 and the North American release for the NES in 1990. As many people may know, at this point in time, Squaresoft was a failing company that released many games that was not well received, including 3D Battles of World Runner, King's Knight, and Rad Racer, although Rad Racer is one of the best received games pre-Final Fantasy. Series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi decided to try one more game, and if it failed, he would quit the industry and go back to university, and influenced by the success of Dragon Quest, created an RPG called Final Fantasy. The game was a surprise hit, selling 1.3 million copies between Japan and North America, and the rest is history, as the series is still coming strong all these years later. I have been influenced and have loved the series since the beginning, hearing about it in Nintendo Power. I still have my own original copy when I got it Christmas 1990. Each game has its own strengths and weaknesses, and some games I like more than others, but the series as a whole has made me who I am today with my gaming tastes. So in honor of the series, I will be reviewing the series as a whole. While most people, when they review the series, only talk about most of the main series games, which is now up to 16 with the release of Final Fantasy 16 in June of 2023, I am going to talk about every single game that I have personally played that has a Final Fantasy name, including spin-offs and a few games that are not technically Final Fantasy games. There is a total of 38 games to go through. There are more games that I have to name, but these are just the ones that I have personally played. So sit back, grab some popcorn, and relax as I take you through a complete Final Fantasy review and retrospective. Final Fantasy I, released for November 18th, 1987, and in North America on the NES on July 12th, 1990, is the first game in the long-running series. Creator Hironobu Sakaguchi, inspired by RPGs like Ultima and Wizardry, created the game in response to the success of Dragon Warrior. Using a core of 7 members, including illustrator Yoshitaka Amano and composer Nobu Uematsu, the game was in development for 8 months before being released. The story was written by Sakaguchi himself, as it follows 4 nameless warriors of light, holding 4 blackened orbs, arriving at the kingdom of Cornelia, as the king tasked them to rescue Princess Sarah from the fallen knight Garland. After success, the game opens up and there is way more to the game than meets the eye. The story goes from rescuing the princess to finding out what the orbs are for, as they are used for the 4 crystals of the elements: earth, fire, water, and wind. The party goes around trying to revive the crystals and their orbs, and without spoiling, an old enemy comes back to face the party, and the game involves time travel and time loops. For 1987, the game had a pretty good story and was involved for its time. The battle system plays off Dragon Warrior, but instead of a stoic screen where it's in first-person view and all you see is the enemy, the layout of the screen shows the enemy on the left side of the screen and the party on the right. It shows actions where the party attacks and uses magic and animation is shown. It's pretty involved for the time, although it's still menu-based like the old RPGs that came before it. It was nothing seen before in its time, and people went crazy as the game sold 1.3 million copies between Japan and the United States, making a large profit and saving Squaresoft from bankruptcy. Also, you are able to customize your party with 6 different classes to choose from: Thief, Red Mage, White Mage, Black Mage, Warrior, and Black Belt. Later in the game, with the story, you are able to upgrade your classes to all new classes. The music, while limited because of the hardware, is memorable, and some of the themes are still used to this day. Composed by the legendary Nobu Uematsu, some of the most legendary songs in the series started here, like the Crystal theme, Prelude theme, the Victory theme, And some of the original songs are great, like the battle theme, Cornelia Castle, and the Earth Cave. Uematsu will become the composer of the series for many, many games to come. Although the game is revolutionary for its time, it is not without its faults. It can be a soul-crushing, difficult game that could turn new fans and RPG newbies off. The game can be a little slow with the battle system, as it's turn-based. You have to wait for all the turns to be finished until you can make your moves again. And there were several glitches, which although were fixed in later versions, the original version had many spells that didn't work in other things. Overall, the game was a success, and personally, I like the game, and it has more pros than cons. It's not a perfect game, and that's why I cannot give the game more than a 6.5 out of 10. Even with all of its flaws and shortcomings, the game was a huge success, and a sequel was inevitable. After the success of Final Fantasy I, Squaresoft and Hironobu Sakaguchi decided to make a sequel to the game and went to work in the second game of the series, Final Fantasy II. Released almost exactly a year later in Japan on December 17, 1988, North America would get a Final Fantasy II for the Super Nintendo, but the widely known story is that the game was actually Final Fantasy IV. North America would not get the proper Final Fantasy II until 2003, when Final Fantasy Origins was released on the PlayStation 1, with the bundle coming with Final Fantasy I and II. The story of Final Fantasy II involves 4 youths whose parents were killed in an army invasion by the Palamecian Empire, led by the Emperor, who is using his magic to bring Hellspawn to conquer the world. 3 of the 4 youths join a rebellion against the Empire, while the 4th one falls into enemy hands. The story revolves around the 3 youths doing different things for the rebellion to eventually take down the Empire and the Emperor himself. But everything isn't what it seems, as the Emperor has some tricks up his sleeve, and they are forced to face a force that is beyond mortal means. Final Fantasy II does more to the story, and the story is darker than the original game, as the game also has a rotating cast of a 4th party member, and a lot of death happens. The game was developed and released by the core members of the first game, along with a few new members. The game is darker and grittier than the first game, dealing with the themes of death in the game. And unlike the first game, their main 4 members have identities and backstories. There is the main protagonist, Firion, who is from Fynn, an enemy of the Empire, Maria, a soft-spoken archer, Guy, a monk who can communicate with animals, and Leon, a conflicted Dark Knight who winds up being missing most of the game. Although they have identities, it is still a bit shallow and not a whole lot of their character traits are prevalent. This is the first game that introduces some of the staples of the series, like chocobos and a character named Sid, although Sid was retroactively included in the first Final Fantasy and future releases. Nobuo Uematsu returns as a composer, and the music is, although limited, still stellar. The world map theme is great. The Rebellion theme, and Castle Pandemonium. Then the staples return, like the Crystal, Prelude, and Victory themes. And also the first introduction of the Chocobo theme, but it isn't fully fleshed out yet. The battle system is quite different from the first game, as there is not a traditional level-up system. Instead, it's a stat level system. For example, the more you use a certain weapon or magic, the more it levels up. Certain actions you do affect how much defense, speed, and HP you get. You want to know how to gain HP in this game? That is correct. You lose HP and you don't cure it. It's a weird leveling up system that turned off a lot of players, and that is why Final Fantasy II is considered the black sheep of the series. Even with the shortcomings, the game was still a success, selling 800,000 copies in Japan and overall 1.08 million copies with the release of Final Fantasy Origins in North America. Personally, I love the story and it has actually been one of my top 5 favorite Final Fantasy games. I'll give this game an 8.5 out of 10. And even though this was the lowest selling game of the first 10 mainline games in the series, Square knew they had a hit and a potential series on their hands. Final Fantasy III is the third and final installment released for the Famicom on April 27, 1990. Although it was a huge success in Japan, selling 1.4 million copies, North America and other regions would not see the release of this game until the Nintendo DS remake on August 24, 2006. The Final Fantasy III North America received instead will be Final Fantasy VI. So until future releases, North America technically never received Final Fantasy II, III, and V. The DS remake also was well received, selling around 2 million copies worldwide, bringing the worldwide sales to around 3.5 million copies, not including the recently released Pixel remaster. The story, with the original Famicom version, revolves around 4 orphans from the village of drawn to a crystal of light, which grants them power, and they go forth to restore balance to the world. With their initial jobs as Onion Knights, they go on a quest to find out the crystal's words and to restore balance, as there is a huge darkness looming behind. The main protagonist being named Zand, who wants to destroy the world because of a gift he received years and years ago. This is also the first game where the main antagonist winds up being a control or a pawn of a higher entity, this one being named the Cloud of Darkness, who wants to disrupt the balance between light and darkness and essentially wipe out all of existence. In this original game, the 4 orphans don't have names or any kind of personalities, just known as Onion Knights. But the DS remake expands on them and gives them names, personalities, and even different places where they live and different motivations. There is a main character, Lunas, his best friend, Ark, a blacksmith's adoptive daughter, Refia, and a soldier of Sassoon Castle, Ignis. Each of them have more personality and more fleshed out characters in the remake, and makes them a little bit more lumpy jobs, and get more abilities with each job. Final Fantasy III also introduces summons, which a lot of them are iconic of the series like Shiva, Bahamut, and Ifrit. The core team members return for Final Fantasy III with Sakaguchi, Amano, and Uematsu, among many others return for this game. As per usual, the music is excellent and many of the songs are brought back like the Prelude, the Crystal theme, and the Victory theme. Along with some new songs like the Airship theme, the final boss theme, and a fleshed out Chocobo theme. The music by now everyone knows and is synonymous with the series in itself. Also, core elements from the series is back like Sid, crystals, and airships. Overall, the game sold well, and with the exception of a few hiccups in its known difficulty, this is by far the best-selling game of the original Famicom games. By this time, the Super Famicom Super Nintendo was already out, and they were focused on making games for the new system, which is why we never got a translation port of the original Famicom game, and wouldn't see it for 16 years. Overall, I like the game, but there are elements that are weak, and the forced job battles and difficulty bring the rating down a little bit, so I can't give the game more than a 6.5 out of 10. It's revolutionary for its time, but there are games in the future that make the elements and aspects better. And that's good, because the next two games, we are moving on to the Super Nintendo. As gaming went on to the next generation of consoles, the Super Famicom/Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, Squaresoft took their now flagship series to the 16-bit era with Final Fantasy IV. Released in Japan on July 19, 1991, it took a few months for the game to get localized and brought over to North America, releasing on November 23, 1991. However, with North America, there was a dilemma. Officially, Final Fantasy II and III were never localized and brought over stateside, so when it was brought over, it was renamed Final Fantasy II for the Super Nintendo. And later, that caused some confusion with the fans when the actual Final Fantasy II and III was brought over. This is the first Final Fantasy game to be completely story-driven with fleshed-out characters, as at this time the remakes and remasters were not released, so the first three Final Fantasies still have blank slate characters. This is the first game in the series that has a wide variety of named characters with personalities, conflicts, and backgrounds. There is the main protagonist Cecil, a disgraced Dark Knight who questions the king of taking Kingdom's crystals, gets stripped of his rank of the leader of the Red Barons, a section of the army of the Kingdom of Baron, and goes on a self-journey to discover himself and to try to stop a sorcerer named Golbez from taking all of the world's crystals and destroy the world. There is Kane, Cecil's best friend, a dragoon, who initially joins him on his mission to deliver a package to the Village of Mist, but not everything is as it seems with him. There is Rosa, Cecil's love interest, a white mage, who shows her unwavering support to Cecil, but mainly is used for plot armor, as she gets kidnapped as much as Princess Peach. There is Rydia, a summoner, whose village was destroyed by an unknowing Cecil, who eventually joins the party and has a very interesting story of her own. There is Yang, a monk from the Kingdom of Fabul, who joins on the same purpose of stopping Golbez and protecting his crystal. There is Tella, an elderly yet strong sage, who is the father of the love interest of Edward, a bard who was killed by the invading Red Wings, now led by Golbez. They both joined the party for revenge. There is the twins Porum and Palom, a white and black mage respectively, who joined the party as spies for an elder of the village, who doesn't quite trust Cecil yet. There is Sid, the first playable Sid in the series, an engineer who helps the party with their airship and eventually gets wrapped in the story. And finally there's Edge, a ninja who joins the party for revenge on one of the four elemental fiends Rubicante destroys his village. Each have their own stories, own personalities, and reasons for joining the party. There is another member who joins the party named Fusoya, but he's only there temporarily and is there mainly for an expedition dump later in the game. Overall, the cast of characters is broad, very charismatic, and a good way to bring the story out of the game, which is the best in the series thus far. And the main villain Golbez winds up being a pawn of a bigger entity, thus the next game where the main villain isn't the final boss, which is an entity named Zemus. The battle system was completely revamped and it debuts a new style of battle system, the active time battle. Gone are the turn-based battles, and this new system revolves around making decisions quickly. Your party and enemies don't wait to attack or do commands, and depending on speed, who gets turns where. It makes you have to make decisions faster, and makes the battle more fast-paced. And it became so popular that the battle system was used for 6 more main games in a row. It was innovative and made the series stand out from other RPG series. It was also dumbed down for North America, as Japanese Don America would find the game too hard and not used to RPGs, so they made the game way easier, and it's perhaps one of the easiest games in the entire series. If you want the game in its original difficulty, check out the Final Fantasy IV 3D remake on Nintendo DS. They make the game brutally hard. Speaking of story, there is a bunch, and I mean a bunch, of fake outs. Without spoiling as much as possible, there are a ton of fake out deaths in the game, and in the end, a lot of the deaths and emotional moments are made underwhelming at times. The music is great as usual, and with the added bits and superior system to this NES, the music is more fleshed out and orchestrated and more epic sounding. Uematsu returns for the fourth game in the series, and the old favorites are back in new 16-bit glory in the main theme. The Prelude. And the Victory theme. Along with the Chocobo theme. With new themes like the Red Baron's theme. Mysidia's theme. And the final boss theme. The music is more orchestrated and grander sounding, and it really adds to the epicness to the game. In the end, Final Fantasy IV has sold over 10 million copies worldwide, including the original, re-releases, and the DS remake. It sold quite well in Japan, and over the years has gotten better in North America. Personally, even though the game is easy, I really enjoy the debut of the active time battle, the story, the music, and everything. It is personally my third favorite Final Fantasy, and really one for the first game in the series, and I made it through all the way, Final Fantasy I being the first. Overall, with everything that goes for it, despite a few flaws and the fake outs, and some of the stupid moments in the story, I gave the game a 9.1 out of 10. And fans seem to agree as the game was well received. The series started on the Super Nintendo, Super Famicom on the right foot, and it only gets better from here. Final Fantasy V, the fifth installment in the series, was released on the Super Famicom on December 6, 1992, about a year and a half after the critically acclaimed Final Fantasy IV. Selling 2.5 million copies on the Super Famicom version alone, translation in the North American release was planned right after the Japanese version. It was going to be titled Final Fantasy III, but plans fell through because of the differing tone and the difficulty of the game. After several failed attempts of trying to bring it over to the rest of the world, North America would finally get the game on the PlayStation 1 on October 5th, 1999, as part of the Final Fantasy Collection bundle, which came with Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy V. The collection wound up selling 765,000 copies that year, bringing the total sales to around 4 million. The story revolves a traveling adventurer named Bartz, who sees a meteorite fall close to him. Bartz and his chocobo partner Boko go to investigate it, only to find an old man who has memory loss named Galuf. Bartz also meets up with the Princess of Tycoon Lena and a pirate captain named Ferris as they go around to, wait for it, save the crystals. But this time, they aren't saved, as they are actually destroyed and broken, but not before each of the crystals give the party different job classes. That's right, job classes are back! The crystals in this game had a secondary job, to seal away the main antagonist of the game, a sorcerer named Exdeath. When all the crystals shatter, Exdeath is free and starts to cause havoc on the world. There is a second world where Galuf and his granddaughter Kryl comes from, and the world where Exdeath is from. Exdeath's ultimate goal is to shatter all the crystals from both worlds, remerge the worlds, and open up the void to destroy the world and recreate it in its own image. And did I mention Exdeath is a tree? A magical tree! The story can be serious at times, but this game is the funniest and lighthearted game in the series up to this point. It is a nice change of pace from the doom and gloom from the previous games. Although most people think of a certain event that happened in a future game, this is the first game in the series with the main party member death that is permanent. The battle system brings back the ATB system from Final Fantasy IV, but with the revamped job system from Final Fantasy III. They took the job system and made it so much better. You've got a myriad of different jobs, and you can level them up with AP, or ability points, when you win battles. You can use the AP to learn passive abilities, which you can equip on your character, for example, expose traps from the Geomancer job, or steal from the Thief class. When you master the job, you can equip them interchangeably. They made the job system and the overall experience completely customizable, and you can play the game multiple times with different jobs with different results each time. It is one of the most replayable games in the series thus far just because of the job system. Stated above, the game was not localized because of the difficulty, and that is a little bit of a disadvantage of the game. I love a challenge, but the game is downright difficult and stressful at times. I have to admit, I have not beaten the final boss of the game without a glitch, and the difficulty just ramps up about midway into the game. They can frustrate new RPG players, although the challenge might be good for veterans. The music is great as usual, with Uematsu coming back for another installment, and the music in this game is very more quirky and lighthearted, matching the tone of the game. By now, people are used to its style of music and what to expect from each game, and the game delivers in music in every rich way. The usual is back with the Crystal theme, the main theme, although this one's a lot quieter than the previous ones. And the victory theme. This also starts a trend, starting at Final Fantasy IV, where the Chocobo theme matches a certain style of music. Final Fantasy IV's Chocobo theme was a samba style, and Final Fantasy V is a mamba style. And some of the new themes of the game are pretty good, like X-Death's theme. Ferris's theme. And the debut of a certain theme and a certain character. That's right! Final Fantasy V is the debut of Gilgamesh, a recurring character of the series, and a lot of times comedy relief and seeker of weapons. He is witty and funny in this game with lines like, "Let's fight like men," and ladies dressed as men. Gilgamesh is awesome in this game, and most of his future appearances is really good too. And also, this is the debut of Tetsuya Nomura, as he drew the monster designs of the game, but also he becomes more prevalent in Square Enix and some of the Final Fantasy games, as he is the creator of the Kingdom Hearts series. Overall, the game was well received, but most people were a bit harsh on the difficulty and the cliche story. It can be a little cliche, but I had a good yet a bit frustrating experience with the game, with the music, the debut, and a very well-known character. And just the overall charm of the game, it's not in my top 5 Final Fantasies, but it still gets a 7.5 out of 10. And it all leads up to what many think is one of, if not the best games in the series. Final Fantasy VI, the 6th main installment of the series, and the final one in the Super Famicom Nintendo era, was released on the Super Famicom on April 2nd, 1994 in Japan, and for the Super Nintendo in North America on October 11th, 1994. As the story goes, as many people know by now, North America did not get the original Final Fantasy 2, 3, or 5, and since Final Fantasy IV was released as Final Fantasy II in North America, Final Fantasy VI became Final Fantasy III. The game was released right at the pinnacle of the Super Famicom Nintendo era, with Squaresoft, now Square Enix, hitting their stride, releasing epic game after epic game. Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, Secret of Evermore, and Live a Live was released right within a year of Final Fantasy VI. By this time, Square was the kings of JRPGs and RPG games in general, and if you were an RPG fan, you knew Squaresoft's name. And what was in the forefront with the entire surge of Squaresoft around this time was perhaps not only one of the best RPGs on the Super Nintendo, but one of the best RPGs of all time. And the sales proved it, as the game became the best-selling game in Japan for 1994, selling 2.55 million copies in 1994 alone in Japan. The game was re-released several times as part of the Final Fantasy Anthology for the PlayStation 1, which had Final Fantasy 5 and 6 on it, a Game Boy Advance release, which had extra dungeons and super boss fights, a Wii Online release, iOS and Android, PC, and the recent Pixel remaster. The game overall sold 5.1 million copies across all versions, not including Pixel remaster. Although that number is pretty high for SNES standards, it pales in comparisons of overall future releases, but it is the 12th best Super Famicom Nintendo game selling of all time. This is the first game without a true main protagonist, as the developers wanted all of the characters in the game to have their own story, their own reasons of joining the party, and not one character being superior to the other. For the most part, if you were to pick a protagonist, it would most likely be Terra, as she is the one that is picked for the Dissidia games, and for the first half of the story before a certain event happens, much of the story is revolved around her. The story revolves around the Gestalian Empire trying to, you guessed it, take over the world!
Of course!
They are using a force that is rare in the world called magic, and beings known as espers, summons in this game, to make magical armor known as Magitech to forcefully take over the world and to bring the world to its knees. There is a group called the Returners, who is a resistance to the Empire, as they slowly build their ranks to take on the Empire and end its tyranny, but not as all as it seems, as there is another force that started behind the scenes and makes its way to the limelight quickly, the main antagonist of the game, Kefka, which I will talk about more later in this segment. The group is forced to stop the Empire and whatever scheme Kefka is planning, as there is way more sinister actions coming into play as Kefka actually almost gets what he wants. This game has a huge rotating cast of playable characters with a total of a whopping 14 characters you can play as and recruit, including 2 optional characters. I was going to talk about the characters in a later segment, but a friend of mine, Earthbound crew member Hunter P. Brown, decided that he wanted to talk about the characters and what they mean to him. So he's going to talk about all the characters, their backstories, their personalities, and what it means to the story. So I'm going to give it to him so he can talk about what he wants to talk about. So without further ado, to talk about the characters and some of the backstories and motivations, here is Hunter P. Brown. I'll leave the link in the description for the Earthbound Crew channel and his personal channel below. So without further ado, take it away, Hunter P.
Final Fantasy VI is the first of the series to allow the player to swap party members at certain points in the game. At the start of the game, you play an amnesiac woman named Terra Bradford. She starts out the game being able to use the mysterious and sealed-away powers of pure magic. Many characters will join Terra on her journey once she decides to join the Resistance. Locke Cole's the first to join Terra. A treasure hunter in name only, he is a thief with the ability to steal from the enemy. Gil, weapons, armor, even clothes at one point of the game. Locke brings Terra to Figaro Castle, home of King Edgar Figaro, a kind but hopeless romantic with the ability to use tools in battle, ranging from drills, biohazardous gas, and even donning a Jason Voorhees-like mask and wielding a chainsaw. Edgar is also a concerned man, having a twin brother he hasn't seen since he became the King of Figaro. His physically stronger twin brother Sabin Figaro, a man trained in the art of physical combat, karateka or monk if you prefer, who Edgar will soon reunite with en route to the Resistance hideout. En route, the party may come across a solitary ninja named Shadow and his beloved canine companion Interceptor. Mysterious, he will not hesitate to kill for the right price. However, beneath the black shrouds of garb he wears is a vulnerable man who carries a heavy guilt on his heart. Upon the first party split-up caused by a battle with Ultros, Sabin is split from the party but will come across two new allies, Cyan Garamonde, a loyal and honorable samurai soldier from the kingdom of Doma. He tags with Sabin upon the death of his family and his kingdom at the hands of the ruthless, insane, nihilistic Kefka Paluzzo, the main bad guy of Final Fantasy VI. Cyan shows extreme guilt for the loss of his family and kingdom. However, he is able to say goodbye to them upon taking a ride on the Ghost Train, which will drop them off at another location, the Veldt. Upon entering the Veldt, a lost and feral young boy named Gao will next join the team. Gao has an interesting ability to learn his enemies' attacks and imitate them, almost like a blue mage. However, he achieves this by eating his enemies on the Veldt, returning a short time later to the party. Not much is known about Gao until later in the game when the party realizes the senile old man is given a triggered memory and begins babbling about how he abandoned his child out of fear. Locke goes solo and returns to the city of South Figaro to ensure its safety after Edgar's daring escape in his mechanized castle from Kefka Paluzzo. It is during this mission that he will encounter Celis Cher, a Magitek soldier of the Empire, and another who can use pure magic. Her abilities with a sword allow her to absorb magic from the enemy and from players in battle. However, unlike Terra, whose magic use comes naturally, Celis' magic use is because of artificial experiments by the Empire. Locke begins to show feelings for Celeste and becomes determined to protect her at all costs. However, later in the game, Edgar says that these feelings are not out of true concern, but out of guilt. When the party convenes in Marsh to protect the Esper that was found at the beginning of the game, Kefka Paluzzo begins an assault but is chased off by the party. In the climactic battle that ends the first act of the game, Terra is revealed to be an Esper, a tribe of people known to have insurmountable magic with abilities beyond comprehension, and is the reason for the Empire's master plan for world domination. Act 2 begins with the party searching for Terra. En route, they can pay Shadow money for him to tag along. In the city where Shadow is found for hire, it is revealed that Locke had maintained the body of a deceased lover named Rachel. He was planning on eloping with, but due to an accident she had fallen to her death. Locke carries this burden with him and why he has shown to be so hell-bent on protecting everyone around him. When Terra is eventually found in the city of Zozo, she is in a coma, and an Esper named Ramuh has been watching over her, explaining her backstory as a half-human, half-Esper, her father being the Esper Maduin, saying that finding magicite of other Espers might be enough to bring Terra back from her coma. The only way to get to the Empire to obtain the magicite is to lure in a man with the only airship in the world, Setzer Gabbiani, a master gambler and game master, using weapons associated with gaming from darts to cards to slot machines. To capture him, Celis agrees to play a lead role in an opera house, with Setzer kidnapping her during the end of the act. Setzer is tricked into helping the party on the grounds of a two-sided coin, and agrees to do so, a man of his word. Inside the Gestalian Empire, they meet other Espers such as Ifrit and Shiva, and meet a man named Sid, a lead scientist in the Empire, and a man responsible for the suffering the Magicite Espers, as well as the experiments that made Celis into an artificial magic user, and Kefka into an insane madman. Sid, heartbroken about learning how magicite is the dead remains of Espers, catches the party off guard when he asks if Celes has joined the Returners as a spy, beginning confusion and accusations amongst the party. Kefka confirms the backup, thus beginning the divide in the party. As an act of hope that Celes would remain good in the eyes of the party, Celes transports Kefka and she away from Sid and the party, giving the party time to collect the magicite and escape the Empire. Upon returning to Terra, her memory is restored and she remembers that her father is an Esper, thus allowing her great power to transform into an Esper and amplifying her magic power. Should the party return to Marsh, they can save a Moogle being attacked by a wolf, and in doing so, the Moogle, named Mog, will join the party. Mog is a dancer who can use the geolocations to either attack the enemy or power up the party. With Terra back in the group, the Empire begins its campaign to open the sealed door to the forbidden land of the Espers. However, in opening it up, they screwed up royally by releasing living Espers into the world. Its leader, Emperor Gestahl, makes contact with the Resistance for peace amongst his kingdom and the Espers, and thus ending the war. Kefka is jailed for his actions at the Kingdom of Doma, and Gestahl wishes for the party to make peace on his behalf to the Espers. To show good faith, Gestahl commands General Leo, a knight of pure honor and pride with no interest in artificial magic experiments, leads the party. Leo also hires Shadow and brings Celes along for the party, causing discomfort especially amongst Locke. Locke eventually swallows his butterflies and tries to talk to Celeste, but she rebukes him. Terra at this time begins to wonder what her purpose is, with General Leo and Shadow both trying to comfort her. Shadow reveals he cut off all of his emotion, something Terra should never do. Upon reaching the Massa, where the Espers have begun to gather, the party meets Strago Magus, an old man with hidden abilities revealed to be of a blue mage. Once he sees an enemy use certain moves or is attacked by one, he himself will be able to use the same moves. His granddaughter, Rel Maroni, an artist, soon takes a shine to Shadow and especially Shadow's dog Interceptor. Shadow tries his best to play it off, but Interceptor breaks through. In the dead of night, Strago and his entire city reveal that they are all magic users, using their magic to put out the flames of a house where Realm and Interceptor had become stuck. Upon saving Realm and Interceptor, the party begins climbing the mountain, with Realm showcasing her abilities to draw enemies and use their own attacks against them, similar to how Gao and Strago use their abilities. The party learns of the Warring Triad, the three responsible for the use of magic and all its power. They are locked away as statues inside the Esper world, with nothing to fear of their power causing chaos again. At the top of the mountains, the parties make contact with Yura, the Esper Elder. Yura explains that because the Forbidden Door was opened, Espers went absolutely mad, losing control of themselves and causing their power to hurt and destroy in the human world. Yura agrees to meet with Leo and a peace treaty is made with the party and the Massa as witnesses. However, it was all a trap set up by Gestahl, with Kefka coming to the Massa. Kefka kills General Leo and begins hunting down the Espers one after another, with the party unable to assist due to being outnumbered. Emperor Gestahl and Kefka then enter the Esper world and revive the floating continent, allowing the two to gain powers akin to the Warring Triad and begin world domination once again, with the Warring Triad at their side. Leo is laid to rest. After his funeral, the party, with Shadow having been knocked unconscious on the floating continent and Celes having returned to the Resistance, they begin their assault on the floating continent. However, Gestahl and Kefka have become too powerful and easily overwhelm the party, sparing Celes. Kefka gives Celes an ultimatum: kill the party or die. Celes at this point realizes who her allegiance is with and stabs Kefka with her sword. In doing so, Kefka's insanity reaches its peak. Gestahl even becomes worried when Kefka stands in the center of the Warring Triad and begins consuming their energy, granting him enough power to the point Gestahl is defeated and thrown off the floating continent. In another act of defiance, Kefka moves the Warring Triad out of its alignment, making their magic containment unstable and thus releasing it onto the world, with Kefka absorbing its power every second. In a final act of desperation, Shadow appears and crushes Kefka between the statues of the Triad, trying to put them back into alignment. The party flees to Setzer's airship, and in the last second, Shadow appears and gets on the ship with them. However, the misalignment of the statues causes the magic to begin tearing the world asunder, destroying land, cities, and killing thousands. Even Setzer's airship is hit, destroying it and causing the entire party to fall from the skies, split up, lost, even possibly dead. This ends Act 2 of Final Fantasy VI. Act 3 begins with Celes waking up from a coma. Sid had found her washed ashore and unconscious, on a deserted island in the middle of nowhere. Sid explains it's been 1 year since Kefka laid waste to the world. Sid has also fallen ill, and wishes to spend the last of his days with Celeste, who begins calling him Grandpa. Celes begins catching fish to hopefully heal Sid, where two things can occur. The first is that Sid recovers and shows Celes the raft he had been building. The second, and most devastating, is that Sid dies, leaving Celes despaired and desperate. Alone, nobody around, and no sign that her friend survived even after she had done everything she could to prove her loyalty to them. She heads to the cliffs and leaps off, effectively going out on her own terms. As if fate intervened, she washes ashore, a seagull chirping and waking her up. The seagull has a piece of Locke's bandana on him, giving Celeste hope that maybe Locke and the party has survived. She goes into the shack where Sid has passed, where a letter is on the bed, written by Sid before his death. He says there's a raft in the basement and that she can use it to return to shore. With new resolve, she takes the raft and is able to get back onto the main continents. When Celes begins her journey on the new continents, her journey helps her find Sabin, Edgar, and Setzer, the latter who laments that he no longer has wings to fly. However, he recalls his friend Darrow, who was his rival and best friend and possible lover. She owned the only other airship in the world, but had crashed the airship and her body was never found. Lamenting, Setzer restored it and buried it in a memorial dedicated to Darrow. Upon retrieving it, the entire world is accessible and the party can begin an assault on Kefka's tower if they wish. The party, now being led by Celeste, starts searching the world for their friends. A seagull leads the party to the Zozo Mountains, where Cyan has been living in solitude and sending love letters to a widowed woman, impersonating the man who lost his life during the world's destruction. Gao had returned to the Veldt for special training and to hone his skills to fight Kefka. Realm has become an artist for renowned collector Ozer and joins the party after defeating an art demon, Chardanok. Mog returned to Marsh and is found to be the only Mughal who survived, but made friends with a Yeti named Umaro, who also joins the party as a berserker. Strago is seen possessed by demons in front of a cultist tower. With Realm in tow, the party is able to free him from the brainwashing, and he returns to the party. Shadow is found unconscious in a cavern on the Veldt and is taken by the party to recover. In his dreams, we learn that Shadow, once named Clyde, was partnered with another named Barum and used to rob trains for a living. However, once found by authorities, Barum was badly injured and begged Clyde to end his life. Clyde refused and ran, leaving Barum behind. Clyde would eventually reach the Massa, marry, and give birth to a baby girl. The girl is believed to be Realm and is confirmed in the lore. Shadow recovers, heads off to the Colosseum, and a party faces him to get him to rejoin the party. Locke is found to have been on a journey for the Phoenix Magicite, which would revive Rachel. Upon reuniting with Locke, he has found the Magicite and quickly returns to Rachel's body to revive her. She returns briefly and tells him that she will always love him, but he needs to release himself from his guilt and learn to love again out of love, and not out of guilt. The Phoenix Magicite absorbs her body, giving it new life and giving Locke his reason to defeat Kefka, thus joining the party. In the northeast, an enemy known as the Zone Eater engulfs the party, but instead of killing them, it transports them into an underground area where a mime named Gogo has been waiting for someone to meet him. Being a mime, his only purpose is to mimic, and the party tells him their mission is to save the world, which Gogo says he will mime as well, thus joining the party as the mime. The final character to join the party is Terra. Terra was found in Molbiz earlier in the game, where many of the town's children have become orphaned. From the time of her realization that she is a half-human, half-esper, she had contemplated what her meaning is, and what are these strange feelings she had. General Leo comforted her on the subject that she will know what love is when the time is right. Her motherly instincts began to manifest, helping the children and aiding them in their growth and safety against a demon named Humbaba. Terra, who was brainwashed from the start and having no recollection other than she can control magic without any issues. Constantly, she was trying to find why she was fighting. Even when the world was ripped apart, she still couldn't find her reason to fight. Even caring for orphan children, she was starting to wander on why she should even bother. It wasn't until the miracle of birth, the possibility of new life being born amongst a world wrought with death, destruction, chaos, famine, and sadness, did she find her reason. Her motherly instincts that mankind has inherited for millennia, she realized what she was fighting for. It was for love. It was for the care that she could give to orphan children. It was the love that she had for her party that had cared for her. It was the love in her heart that filled her with hope, that life would begin anew, and that life is sacred amongst her and the children she cared for. She agrees to go with the party at last, thus completing the 14 characters of the party. The party begins a three-pronged attack against Kefka, eventually coming across the warring triad in each attack: the demon, the goddess, and the fiend. However, upon defeating them, the party realized that Kefka had absorbed their power completely, thus becoming a god. The party confronts him, Kefka showcasing his power and raging on with nihilistic intent, wanting to hear why each of the party members continues to fight when their demise is inevitable. Terra represents love, Locke represents compassion, Edgar represents leadership, Sabin represents freedom, Cyan represents honor, Shadow represents forgiveness, Strago represents determination, Celis represents empathy, Realm represents kindness, Gao represents innocence, Setzer represents legacy, Mog represents friendship, Umaro represents fury, Goko represents learning, a blender of characters that anyone playing can at one point relate to. However, Kefka is disgusted and begins his assault on the world and against the party. The party climbs a tree of woe and is able to destroy Kefka, and thus ending the power of magic and shattering all magicite. In doing so, however, Terra begins to show signs of dying as her Esper side is the one affected. However, thanks to words from her father Madwing, if her human side has found something strong enough to hold on to, she will be able to live. With the birth of a new baby breaking the cycle of death, she is saved, having become a full human. The party sets out, Terra letting her hair out, and begins to rebuild the world with newfound hope and love.
This game is also as personal to him as it released him from his demons, his guilt, and his anger of a bunch of issues that he had in his life. That is how much of an impact this game has had, and how it still holds up over the years. Each of these characters, with the exception of Gogo and Amaro, have their own reasons, personality, humor, and desires to join the party, and this makes the game the most diverse cast of characters yet. I absolutely love most of the characters in the game, and they hold a special place in my heart. But there is one, above all, hands down, in my opinion, the best villain in the entire series. It is time to talk about Kefka, the best villain in the series. What makes him so great is his uncaring, nihilistic view on everything. His sole motivation is to cause chaos and to watch the world burn, just because he wants to. He was a former court jester with the Empire, but became the first person to endure the magic experiment, and although it was a success and he was infused with magic, his mind was cracked and warped and made him the way he is. He initially acts like he is cooperating with the Empire to grab Espers, drain them of their magic, and make the Empire stronger, but in actuality, he wants to take the magic for himself and make himself stronger, and eventually wanted to take over the world and become the god of magic. And you know what? Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! He actually succeeds. He destroys the world, becomes the god of magic, and rules the world with an iron fist. It takes the efforts of every single party member to take him down. That doesn't even include how funny the guy actually is with his one-liners and puns. He is a complete villain, and honesty, in my opinion, he is the best villain in the series. He really gives the party a hard time throughout the game. The battle system is tried and true, with the ATB system coming back for the third time. You get EXP and levels for defeating enemies, but new to this game is the Magicite system. You can get the souls of Espers and use them to gain certain abilities and magic when equipped, so each party member can be customizable, but each character can also learn the same magic abilities with the Espers. It can also make the characters different in their own way, but also the same, as every party member can essentially learn the same magic, depending on the Espers equipped. Also new to this game is Desperation attacks, which allow a character to cast a powerful attack when their HP is low. This will eventually be known as different things in the future, but this is essentially the debut and birth of limit breaks. Overall, the battle system should be familiar, but with subtle differences with the Magicite system. The game itself isn't too hard with the difficulty. It has its moments, but it isn't as brutal as Final Fantasy 3 or 5. It has enough difficulty to keep a veteran RPG player invested, but it's not so hard that it turns new RPG players away. It has a happy medium, and with the story, it's hard not to be invested in the game. This game is also the first game in the series not to be directed by Hironobu Sakaguchi, as he had other projects and he had a new role as Executive Vice President of Square. For that reason, he was a writer and producer but passed director responsibilities to Hiroyuki Ito, who worked as a battle planner and debugger in previous games, and eventually regular mainstay of the series, Yoshinori Kitase, who worked as the event planner and field planner in Final Fantasy V. Kitase, in general, will go on to bigger and better things in the series, but this is the first game he was able to sink his teeth into. A little known fact, Ito, the other director, would go on to direct future Final Fantasy games, but he is also the creator of the active time battle system itself. The regular crew has returned, like Yoshitaka Amano, Tetsuro Nomura, and others, and by now there are a lot of different people working on the game, and of course, the music is done once again by Nobu Uematsu. The music has more of a grander feeling to it and a bit of whimsy with a few tracks. As expected, the Old Faithfuls are back with the Prelude Crystal theme. The theme of Final Fantasy, although it's a little harder to find, as it's embedded in the ending song. And the victory theme. And Final Fantasy IV had the Chocobo theme as a mambo, Final Fantasy V had a samba theme, Final Fantasy VI is more of a techno theme. But it will be even more techno later in the series. Some of the new tracks for the game is great too, like Zozo's theme. The boss theme. Shadow's theme. And who can forget the iconic opera scene? But one theme rules over them all, and for the rest of this video, I will play that theme. The final boss theme, Dancing Mad. There are so many other themes that could make the list as some of the greats, but I only have so much time to showcase some of these. find a playlist on the OST on YouTube and listen for yourself. This is also the first game in the series with true side quests. Some of the other games had side quests like getting a pan from Yang's wife in Final Fantasy IV, piano playing in Final Fantasy V, and other things, but Final Fantasy VI is the first one with large spiraling side quests. There is the auction house, where you can bid for items, the Colosseum, where you can fight strong monsters, and technically the second half of the game is a large side quest, where you recruit the other party members, as you don't have to get all the party members to fight the final boss. And there's also a super boss that is hard to find in Death Guise. That adds even more to the game and gives you reason to come back, as you never know what you will find. Overall, the game was critically acclaimed, as you can see about how much I've talked about it. This is by far my favorite game in the series. The story, the characters, the villain, everything about this game is masterfully done, and I haven't even found a Final Fantasy game that has topped this one as of yet. This game gets the DK Gold Star, and will be the only game in the series to get a 10 out of 10. Even my second favorite game in the series has a couple of flaws. As this is the final game of the SNES, Squaresoft was prepared to move on to the next Nintendo system with Final Fantasy VII, but there were some factors that made it move over to an up-and-coming new system, which we will talk about soon enough. And with this, we go to perhaps one of the most well-beloved games in the series, to another well-beloved game in the series, and by far the most popular. Final Fantasy started off as an experiment for a failing company, and what was created was something bigger than what was ever imagined. This is part 1 of my retrospective and review of the series, and this is what I like to call the classic era. This is the beginnings of the series, and it shows how much the series has grown over the course of 2 systems. As the series continues, it will only get bigger, and more innovation and firsts will be happening. Stay tuned for part 2, as we continue through one of the most lucrative and successful times in Squaresoft history. But it's not without some controversy and even a little bit of betrayal on their part. All that will be revealed next time. So I hope you enjoyed the humble roots of this awesome series, and I'll see you next time for part 2. Have a good day.